What's up, guys, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode. This time we're going to be working on a project from another garage. The evil geniuses over at Mad Samples have created something, and I get to help out on it. This is a 1965 C10 that they body swapped onto a 2004 Suburban. So it's a Bourbon down there and it's a C10 up there. And we're gonna wire the two together. To make all this happen, we've got a painless wiring harness for the truck, and we've got a Holley Terminator X Max that's gonna control the engine and transmission. I know wiring is not everybody's favorite thing to accomplish, but it needs to be done on every project. I love it. As with everything, start with the instructions. They even put "before you begin" on here. So now we got our harness laid out. It's not really that bad. Everything that they do with painless, they try to make it as painless as possible, hence the name. They do have headlight section 1. It's all labeled on here, so you know what circuit it is. They label the circuit. That goes to the headlight switch. This goes to the dome light. So you kind of know where you're going to be putting things and which way you're going to send it out. They even have the common bundling. So if this is all going to one area, it's all bundled together, so you can kind of lay it out, the little snake in the truck, and it's not that bad. So they give you a ginormous book. I mean, it looks kind of intimidating. I got it. They did make it pictures in the print fairly larger for us old people, so you can read it. And then it'll go into each section, like the headlight section, which goes off in the front harness. It'll tell you, here, headlight section. Your first 2 wires you're going to put through are going to be here, and it shows you pictures of where that goes through. It tells you once you get to the core support, use a 1/2-inch socket. It's almost like a Chilton's manual for installing one of these harnesses. It's not that bad. When you get to the end of some of these wires, some of them, if they're already, this is going to obviously go to the dimmer switch. If that's already the length that normally fits in 90% of the trucks, they'll terminate it. But some of the wires that you figure out where they go, or for custom applications, are unterminated, and they'll give you the terminals in here. You just got to make sure you use the right crimper. This is just some of my wire crimpers. There's a number of different sizes and styles, but normally all your GM stuff is usually this style. You either got the single or the double heads. Pretty much all you need, some sort of connector. You can get these iCrimp or iWiz ones that kind of do the same thing. These are like 30 bucks. Don't be intimidated. Take it one section at a time. So the first thing we got to do is we're going to have to locate the fuse block, because that's where everything starts from. They did put some magnets on here, and these magnets will hold it up to the firewall and kind of figure out where you want to go, kind of locate that. But if you notice, it does not, like on some of these vehicles, your connector is on the back here. So wherever this block goes is where your pass through to the firewall is. This one's not like that. You can mount this kind of wherever you want and then run your wires through. Here's a firewall hole. They give you a cover plate because you don't need that big of a hole anymore. And that's going to go over this. What we're going to need to do is sneak that back behind this gasket here. So I'm going to try to make that a little more pliable because this is old. See if I can't sneak this behind there. But at the same time, we got to apply some sealant on the back of this to make this weather tight. And then there's got 2 holes here that we got to nip in there, and that'll mount that. Today's menu choice is Loctite polyurethane roof and flashing for chimneys, joints, shingles, and apparently firewall bulkheads, because that's what we're going to use today. So now that we got our hole sealed, I kind of don't want to use that hole, and I'll explain to you why. That's where that lives now. Anyways, there's a provision here that you can run your forward harness out of this hole. It comes with a grommet, and you can, do things, but you see wires. I don't like seeing wires. So on the underside of this fender, there's nothing. And there's this convenient little tray here that goes all the way up there into the core support. And wouldn't you know it, that's where the lights are. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole on the inside right there, and I'm going to get a little rubber plug and plug that little guy up, and you'll never know it because it's all black. But then you can hide the wires in here. There's only like 5 wires, but I don't want to see them. So that brings me over to here. Am I doing all right? Sorry, woke you up. She's old. So that brings me over here. I've got some space down here. That's where the harness would go through. I've already got our sealant on there. This is where I drilled my hole right down that fender and shoot those wires, and they'll be out of the way of the tire. They'll be hidden. You'll never know they're there. Well, now you will because it's on the internet. So that means I'm going to put my fuse block somewhere in this area. So I'm going to get some holes drilled for that so I can mount this little guy up and make sure I leave enough room that I can get my wires everywhere. And then we're going to start laying this mess of spaghetti out. What do you think, Doug? She's over it. I already had to drill one hole for the bottom of that plate, so instead of drilling another hole in this thing, I'm going to use that hole, drill it a little bit bigger, and run the bolt through. 2 holes, 1 job. A video on that somewhere, I'm sure. All right, we got our fuse block mounted, got our hole drilled. I'm going to start laying out these chunks of wire where they need to go. Main harness is kind of long, but we're going to start routing it up through back in here. If I get you a good shot, I took all the gauges and everything out so we can kind of see what we're working with in here. And it should give us some decent room to lay things out. So let's get to that. So Painless has an option for your wires that you can wrap them with basically a Tech Flex. They have kits that are already pre-cut, and they give you all the lengths here for the pre-cut lengths that you're going to need if you route your stuff how they do for the instructions. I've never been one to follow instructions, and I always try to run my stuff so it's a little bit less visible. So what I'm trying to get at is we bought some split sleeving, it says. This is off Amazon. I buy all my stuff off Amazon just because, you know, they have a good rate return policy. If I don't need it, don't use it, I give it back to them. They get my money back. They don't ask me any questions. But this is the Alex Tech split sleeving. I'll put a link in the description. It's like $8 or $9, and I think you get 20 feet. So that works out pretty good for me. I do like to wrap Tessa tape around that. Tessa's the brand. It's like a fabric tape. If you guys have ever done, I mean, if you're doing this, you're unwrapping the other guy's electrical tape that got hot and is all greasy and nasty and all over your fingers. This doesn't do that. It kind of blends in with the Tech Flex because it's got the same kind of consistency, and it helps, I guess, basically seal the ends of your Tech Flex. So all my wire runs I put in Tech Flex, and then I wrap the Tessa tape around it. It just kind of protects that, gives it an extra layer of protection from abrasions and all that kind of stuff. So now that I got my forward light harness in place and where I'm thinking it's going to be hidden, we're going to go ahead and wrap this harness up, and I'm going to get it stuffed through the firewall here. To keep this clean, I'm probably going to hide most of my wires up under here in the backside. That way they can't fall down. There's a couple different provisions in here that'll hold them in place. Still going to put them in Tech Flex, and the Painless kit gave me, if I can find it, Painless kit gave me these little grommets that'll grab onto the wires on the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these grommets over the wire right about where I'm going to drill a hole in the firewall. That way when I plug this in, it'll be weather tight so no water can get in from, you know, kicking around off the tires and things and get back behind the core support. And then we're going to wrap that and seal it with some Tech Flex. Hey, front light wire harness is in. Got my Adele clamps here with the rib nuts here holding it up. Got my grommet installed. I made a comment earlier that I don't really like to follow instructions. What I like doing is putting a relay on the high beam and the low beam circuits. So the voltage that comes from the switch just tells the relay to turn on, and then that relay will send power from the battery, which is right next to this headlight right here, and send you full battery power to the headlights. What the factory does is it sends that headlight power from the battery all the way into the fuse block, then through the switch, and then comes back out. So, you know, voltage dropping across distance and through different switches and bad connections and things. If you got 12 volts, hopefully at your battery, you might get 9 volts at your headlights, which doesn't shine very bright. We're going to give it the full voltage that it needs right here at the front. So what that means with the Painless harness is they actually separate a left and a right headlight wire off of your headlight wire that comes from inside. So it's wide off right here. You can see they didn't cut theirs, I did this, but it Y's off like that. I just cut that off because I don't need any of that. However, I'm going to keep this wire because it's already labeled and things, and we're going to make another harness out of that. So I have a few of these relays. These are the Bosch style 30 amp heavy duty relays. You don't really need this for headlights, but this is what I like using because they're weather tight and I can mount them up under the firewall here. So we're going to use 2 of these, 1 for each circuit, and we're going to have these activate when you turn on your lights. It will turn on, when you turn on your low beams, it'll give power to the relay, and that'll give power to the lights. So there's my relays. They're mounted and labeled. Threw a horn on here. This vehicle did not present with a horn, so I dug into my drawer and I found a dual horn set, but if you just use one horn, it sounds kind of wussy. So I think that's the one we're going to use. It sounds kind of hey, hey, just like that. So that's the horn he's going to get. You're welcome, Davey. And wired the horn up, wired the relays up. Got everything sitting in here so you can't really see any of the wires. Pass through for the battery is there. I don't have a 7/8 grommet, so I had to order one, but that'll be here probably tomorrow. And then I can terminate this wire onto the battery. Anyways, continuing to move forward, we're going to be putting the headlights in here next. The headlight harness from Painless already has a terminated ring terminal for the ground. I was going to run something in the headlight bucket assembly, but if there's ever, because that bolts with these 3 bolts, if there's ever any corrosion there or paint or anything that keeps the bucket assembly from making electrical contact to that, your headlights will be dim or won't work. And you know, we're in Missouri, so naturally there's plenty of things in the weather that'll build up in there and make it so it's not perfect. So I just ran a stud, drilled a hole, put a bolt through. It'll be hidden, you won't be able to see it, but you'll have great electrical connection, which is the theme with these headlights so far. And you won't have to worry about a ground. So there's my ground. I'm going to start making this headlight harness and toss that in there. Oh, and I wired it with this diagram. So if you're looking for how did I wire these up, what did I do, just follow this, pause this and follow this. It's really simple. You got a trigger on one side that turns the relay on, and then it sends battery voltage through 30 and then out the other side to the headlights. Well, lights are wired and front end's back together. I got to put some zip ties down here, kind of clean up this loom that's down there on the bottom. Anyways, front light harness is done. Now we're going to move on to the spaghetti that I left on the steering wheel. Oops, I lied. We're going to do the turn signal harness next. I forgot about these guys up here, so I'm going to have to run these little guys, the blue and the purple. I've been looking at this and I can't find a clean way to do it. It suggests that I take the hood braces off right here and run the wires down in the back of the channel, and then it comes out of a grommet right there and goes down and inside, but I'm just going to have wires there, and I don't like seeing wires. I guess if that's the only thing that you see for the wiring for the truck side, at least, I guess that'll be all right. I don't know. I may just assemble the one side of it and then go from there and see what I like. There's not really a whole lot to work with here. You do have a hinge gap because the hood obviously comes up. So there's quite a bit of room in here that a wire would have to be, and there's nothing that makes that run and doesn't move. I mean, the hood hinge kind of stays in place, so maybe I can attach something to the hinge that still moves. I don't know. See what happens when I get these wires ran. Sometimes when you're doing kits like this, there's variances in both the instructions and or in the pickups. Sometimes throughout model years it changes and the instructions don't pick it up, or there was supposed to be something on a truck and it got swapped sometime in its life. This scenario, it's telling me that I need to have 5/16 grommets in the hood right above the turn signal socket, and it's not there. There's no hole in there. There's a hole here-ish, but that's not the right size, and if I were to run wires to it, it's kind of out of the way. But that's okay. They gave us the grommets. So we're just going to poke a hole in there. Right up there in the corner will give me plenty of room. There it is on that side. Got the grommet nice and seated so the wires aren't going to catch on anything, and that gives you, if you do it in the diagonal here, it gives you almost twice as much room so your drill bit doesn't hit the fresh paint. I hate drilling on freshly painted stuff because people are human and stuff happens. Gotta be careful. Anyways, we're gonna get this turn signal light back installed. It did also say if your vehicle is freshly painted, make sure your grounding surfaces are smooth and shiny. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna make sure that all of our mating surfaces where the grounds are gonna go through are making good contact so that these lights are also bright. Then we'll start fishing these wires. You can see my wires are coming out of here. You cannot see them up top. Over on top of the roof brace, or the hood brace, they run on top with these little, I call them little Christmas tree fasteners, and a little zip tie goes through there and it holds it in place. So you see the back side of that right there. Two little Christmas tree jobs. So that's way tucked into there. It's not going anywhere. You're not going to see it. They did say to put these wires down this brace, which is great, but there's no provision to make it there cleanly. I think what they wanted me to do was just kind of secure it to the outside here and then like stick it on the sides of the brace, but I'm not doing that because then you'll still see wires. So the most wire you're going to see is right there, and that's going to go in this brace, and then under the cross brace that goes down, it'll pop out behind it. You'll never even know, and it'll just go right along the side down here. It'll continue on into here, and then there's a little grommet that comes out and a weather pack job that's there. Well, there she is. Wires are in there, you can't hardly see them. And then it comes out a little grommet guy here, and it's dangling there for the weather pack connector. I shall terminate that later. It's about getting time for me to go pick my boy up from school. I know looks like it's 9 o'clock at night, but daylight savings time. Yay, it's dark. So I'm gonna go do that, and probably gonna get some food and call it night, and we'll continue on with this tomorrow. Next up's the engine section. We have LS swapped, so we're not using the stock gauges. So most of these are not gonna be used. You've got purple goes to the ignition switch. It's the solenoid off of the switch in the cab. Red goes to get you power to the fuse block. That's gonna feed everything in the fuse block. Blue is going to be coolant temp sender. Purple and white's going to be tax signal. Pink is going to be to the coil. The two green ones are going to be for coolant temp. And the red one, I don't remember what that one is for. Oh, it's the choke circuit. So we're not using anything out of here right now. I am going to save this coil wire. This is supposedly a 30 amp circuit that's hot in run and start, which is, if you're doing what we're going to be doing later for Terminator, this is perfect for that. It's hot in run, but it's also hot in start. Purple wire here, it's going to go to the solenoid on the starter, and the red wire, which you could put to the starter lug. I might put that straight to the battery. We'll see how complicated that looks like getting that untangled, but it might go to the starter lug too. I don't know. We'll see. But starter lug, and coil. So all these need to go to the passenger side of the vehicle, and the rest of these guys can get tucked up out of the way. All right, well, I pulled that battery feed for the fuse block back all the way to the beginning. I should have read that sooner. Normally I scan the entire instruction book and make those changes in the beginning before when I'm on the table, but I missed it. Anyways, pulled that all out, re-zip tied and taped everything back up for the harness. Joined that in with the forward light harness that went up the side and came in by the battery. I got to get some terminals for the battery, so we won't make any connections yet. So now I'm going to run that engine section of the harness, but before I do that, going over the steering column and across and everything and down the river and through the woods, I'm going to wrap all of this because you don't want wires just hanging around under here just for reasons. So for some abrasion protection and to kind of clean it up and make it look better, I'm going to run some Tech Flex on here. I think this is 1 inch. I had this in my drawer, and I got the 1/2 inch here for the little joints that come off of there. We're going to get this taped up, well, installed. I kind of cut the sides and allow this to wrap around where I got sections coming out. So each one of those I got to go up there and cut and tape and make sure that it's terminated correctly, and then I can start getting this giant snake through there and over there. So there's my big old harness. It's going up and over the column here, and I've got some Some of the little sub harness is kind of hanging out, but right now we're going to work on locating this where it needs to go so it's nice and secure. If you look back in here, the factory had these little clips that went into the metal, and then that went alongside the factory harness. So if I can pop those little clips out, I can pull this over there and then tape this piece to here, and then I can use that little Christmas tree job to stick it back in there, and it will be secure. And there's one on that side, so that should take care of holding the main harness up. So I'm gonna get those out now. Morning, guys. Afternoon, really. Day 2 on the wiring. Started a little later this morning because I had to do some repairs to the building. Got that done, and we're about to dive back into this truck before I gotta go pick the boy up from school. Let's go. All right, here we can see that the harness is in place. I got it tacked in on the left and the right side. I don't mean welding tacked in, but I've got it. Drop you down a little bit. I've got it secured up here with a clip on either side. Started running my Tech Flex on here to each of these breakout pieces. We're not going to be running gauges in this, so the little guy's just gonna sit there. There's a lot of extra provisions for things that we're probably not going to be using in this truck. Creature comforts are there, but they'll be saved for later. So we're probably not going to run a cigarette lighter, which is what this guy's for. There's another little sub harness here for the radio. Another one for electric cooling fan. Leave them looped up and ready to go, so if the next guy comes in here and wants to wire one of these things up, they can just grab one of these harnesses. All these other things that we are going to use, like reverse switch, what is this? The brake switch, all that kind of stuff. We'll go ahead and get those where they need to go. I don't like where that's going right now because all these need to be over here, so I'm probably going to pull that little guy out of there. I like how that went out over that far and then things had to come back, so I dropped it down here. I'm just going to leave these pieces. I know are going to go to the instrument cluster here. Some of them we're not going to terminate now, like the brake switch, reverse lights, all that kind of thing. In fact, I don't even think this truck has reverse lights on it. Go on to probably the next easiest thing for me to land is going to be this rear light harness. Keep some of these bundles out of the way. And right in here, this is the tail section. So I'm going to start prepping this harness so that I can stick it through the hole there. That means I'm going to wrap it with some Tech Flex. All right, that harness is in. Now let's get to the next one. All right, the next section we have is the engine section. You got your voltage regulator wires, which we're still going to probably use for the LS alternator. And then you got coolant. I think we discussed this earlier. There's a whole bunch of temp sender wires in here, which we're not going to be using. And then there's the one that we need, which is for the starter solenoid, which is going to come off of the switch here. So I'm just going to sneak this little guy out because that's really one of like 3 wires that need to go under the hood from this harness. And all these other guys I may or may not need in the future, so just like the other ones, we're just going to bundle these up and leave these for the next guy, or if I get tasked to wire this up for me later, so it's easier. I'm going to start holding this up and see where it's going to fall from length so I know how much of this loom I need to put and where this is going to go. Doing a very complex finger measurement, I determined that that's how long my Tech Flex needs to be to go to that hole over there. We're going to secure these wires in the end of that. I'm not going to tape this off because I think I need to put more stuff through that hole later on for the holly. So we're just going to leave this here for now. And I'm going to poke those guys through. So I'm going to skip the alternator wiring for now because one, it's not here, and two, I'm not ready to do the engine bay side of it. I'm going to probably snip that wire in with the terminator when I get to that point. But for now, those two wires are going to get loomed over to where the alternator's at. The alternator then connects to the battery post. So when you're doing this, the one side that Painless doesn't touch is your wiring. The battery post, the positive battery cable, negative battery cable, grounds between the engine and the frame, from the frame to the body, and the body to the battery. What else? There's another one. I can't think of it right now. Anyways, everything's got to be grounded so that anything possibly you ground in the car has a ground, and all that has to get back to the battery. The 12-volt side of it, from the battery positive post, that has to go to a couple of different places. One, it has to touch the fuse block, so you have to have power getting sent to the fuse block because that powers everything else. That's the wire that I spooled up here and left on top of the battery for later. You also need power to the alternator and power to the starter, amongst all the other things you may or may not have on this car. So the LS motors have this bracket right here, and there's a battery positive post there that does a couple of things. It takes the battery voltage that comes off the battery itself, large gauge wire, goes to what's basically a distribution block that feeds off your alternator, and that also goes down and under the motor and feeds the starter. So my battery positive feed that comes in from the fuse block and also from my headlight relay harness comes in right here and would connect it back to the battery. The Painless harness wants you to run this MIDI, M-I-D-I fuse, to protect their fuse block. I'm also going to use that to protect the headlight relay positive feed. And I think I'm going to just drop this little guy right there. You won't even know it's there. And run my wires up here to the battery terminal. I can't in good conscience put this alternator cable back on. I don't know what size that is. 10, maybe 8 gauge. Anyways, we're going to replace it with a 6 gauge just so that everything matches and we get the most out of what we got. These still got to get tightened down, but they're just in their rough positions right now. You're not really going to see this unless you're looking for it. You know, it's red, but it's hidden down there. This wire is going to come across and connect to my battery terminal. That should be here in a few minutes. And I'll probably put an Adele clamp down there to hold this wire down. Replace this alternator wire so we're getting, you know, more amperage to this post. And then this is the wire that came with the engine. I don't know. When we get to hooking this up, I may play around with that, reroute that, and re-terminate that in so it's not 9,000 feet long like it was in the truck. Kind of wraps up our battery positive for now. Like I said, the alternator we're going to deal with kind of threw an audible with me because this one is a PWM alternator, and that's not what we're looking for in this build. So on fire up day, we're going to swap those out real quick for a non-PWM alternator. Anyways, I'm not finalizing those connections yet because it's got to come back off. That's what I'm getting at. So we're going to keep moving forward. I'm going to go see what the next step is. All right, so now we're going to tackle the alternator wiring and get that laid in there so it's ready to go. This particular kit comes with the alternator plug for a lot of the common alternators, but they don't anticipate an LS swap for this. So if you have the, what is it, C130, the old 2-wire job, this will work great. It comes with this little connector, little spade connectors. You can crimp those together. There's a diagram for that. They give you probably about 10 different alternator wiring diagrams, early GM style, 10 SI, which is probably what it would have came with. If you go to the CS130s, the internally regulated 1-wire type deals and how you hook that stuff up. So it can't give you everything, right? Thankfully, or not thankfully, depending on how you look at garage space, I have that mounted. Just don't look at it too long. Anyways, I have that, which is all kinds of random stuff that I save. And I just so happen to have the CS130 Delta alternator connector, which is that little guy. So we're going to wire this up using the supplied resistor, how the instructions call for it, and attach this to the harness. Then when I get to the next step of the install and do the engine management system, I can lay that in the tech flex of that. So let's get to doing that. All right, so for this orientation, we're going to be looking at the back side of the connector with the little locking tang on top. You're going to have this little white wire. I guess that's brown, gray. We're going to have this light colored wire and this red wire. This little guy we're not even going to worry about, so I'm just going to tape it into the harness and you'll never even know it was there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to determine where our splice point's going to be. So the first one's going to be here. I'm just going to trim these off just so they're the same length. And then these will get spliced together, but after you've put the resistor in line on the red wire. So I'm going to trim this resistor down so it's more manageable. Crimp the end pieces on there. Make sure you put your purse down. You want a good crimp. Not like that. That makes it a little more manageable to hide in this heat shrink here. We're going to be putting this on, checking my wiring diagram again, the red wire. So I'm just going to pick a spot. That looks great. Right there. Trim a little bit of this back. Put this little guy on here. Crimp that up. Crimp that up. Dog. Now we're going to strip the other end. Put that in there. Yeah, nice and tight. I'm going to trim these off even. Strip off the insulation. And I ran out of crimps. Give me that one. We're going to use that. Put it on here, crimp it down really nice and deep like. Yep. And we're going to heat shrink just over that resistor to start with. And when I make the connection to the harness, I'll heat shrink the other side so it's completely sealed. Make sure you do this on a plastic table so it melts it. Ooh, that's hot. Yep, still hot. Let me try it again. Yep, that's hot. Squish this glue. That's hot. Never would have guessed. And here's our assembled alternator pigtail. All we gotta do is join it back into the harness. And then we connect the alternator plug that we made to the brown wire, the regulator. This is optional. You can still use the red wire and connect that to the battery charging port if you would like. You don't need to because we're doing that same function here. So like I said, this is more for stage 2. When I run the other harness in here, I'm gonna put that into the wire loom, but let's just pretend that we made that look all nice and pretty and that plugged into that alternator. There we go, that's done. Cool. So I got ahead of myself and I forgot to film. Taillight harness goes down. You see it right in here. It picks up on the factory Suburban wire loom deal. Goes back. Comes along there. Then I went up over the tank. And it comes back here and goes through the frame and across. These are they're supposed to be grounded. The case is supposed to ground to the bracket here. Sometimes corrosion and things happens over the years. I just added a ground here. We're already in here, it makes sense. So I added a ground. It's going to the body here. And then I also added another ground under to the frame. So I mean, just in case you ever have issues here, it'll be grounded to the frame, so you should never have issues with your taillights. Wrapped this up, ran it so you can't really see where it's at. I'm supposed to be running a license plate lamp here, which I just found out I need to order that, so I ordered that. That's going to terminate here. The license plate will mount. That's for the license plate lamp. And then the passenger side is done. So can't really test that yet because I got to hook the battery up. Can't hook the battery up because I got to put the switch in it. So I'll show you guys the finished product when it's finished. But for now, taillight harness is ran, and that means I got to run and go get my boy from school. So the next section that we're going to get into is going to be the interior wiring. They call it the dash harness, the instrument cluster, whatever you want to call it. There's a few switches in there. Some of these things they don't reproduce, or if they do, they're Chinese and they don't work very well. You got the headlight switch, the ignition headlight switch, the ignition switch, the wiper switch, and everybody's favorite, the dimmer switch. This thing's on the floor. It's got foot grime and years of gunk in there. Sometimes it's basically just switches from sending power to this side or to that side. So high beams or low beams. It just sends power down a wire. So all it is a little bit of beep, touching some stuff together. Sometimes these work, sometimes these don't. Some guys have problems with them, you know, on the side of the road and have to get out in the rain and wire these. You know, just doing things. But what we're going to do is we're going to verify if this thing works and see if this, you know, $10 part is going to cause us problems. So we're going to do that real quick. So we've got our switch. Power comes in and goes to one of the other terminals. I could probably look up the diagram, but it doesn't really matter. I don't have power here, so I should be able to push it and have power on it. And I'm using the diode test, so it'll go beep like that when the two touch or when the switch is closed. So this side doesn't seem to be making contact. Sometimes you can just mash on them and they start working. But so this switch is intermittent in how it works, which means the connectors in there are probably all gummed up, which is good to know before we start wiring stuff and trying to plug it in and make sure it works. because you could be troubleshooting a broken part. Painless does have this kit that they sell. You could get it with your harness, 80121. It comes with all new switches. I don't know what brand they use or whatnot, but switch is a little different style than ours. Anywho, a lot of these type of connectors they don't make anymore. I'm sure you might be able to find some Chinese knockoff somewhere online, but if you just take the pins out of the old switch plug, and you just take a pick or a flat screwdriver, knock these little tabs back, and you can take them out. They come pre-terminated on the painless harness. If you just knock down that little locking tab in there, stick your screwdriver in, knock that down, this will pull right out of the cavity, and then you have basically the body of the connector that you can use in your harness. You just plug in the painless stuff, boop, 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 where they go, and you have yourself a connection harness. So what we're going to do is we're just going to verify that all of our switches work. They seem to be in good working order. I guess we'll test that out here when we get it on the truck. And if you know we have good switches, then we can start making connections. All right, next we're going to tackle some of this stuff under the dash here. We're going to do the windshield wiper switch. So we're going to see what kind of switch we got. That's the kind of switch we got. According to the diagrammatics here, that's a 2-speed wiper system with a washer pump. So the wiring that they gave us is assuming that we got the base model Barbie, and it just gives us, oh, that fell out. I'm going to have to pull both those out and make sure those are connected right. Anyways, after I do that, they assume that we have the base model Barbie in there that just needs the basic power either on or off, and it gives you power and the grounded from the switch, but we don't have that. Fun fact though, they anticipate that and they give you this little harness, which is nicely labeled wiper motor. So that'll give us our supplied grounds and connections we need for the switch. So I'm going to terminate that wire that obviously was not terminated correctly from the factory, and I'm going to run these wires into the harness that I've already ran, because I should have read ahead and put that in there. But if you guys are watching this video, maybe you'll watch it before you do it and you can put everything together. Save yourself some work. Be right back. All right, wiper motor connections are landed just how the diagram says. I'm just zip tying these in place now. I'm not making these bundles and tech flexing it all up till I get everything installed and everything's where it needs to be, then I can wrap it. So it's going to go up here and it's going to land. And it's going to land over here where the wiper switch goes. I believe it's going to have these 3 plugs for our 2-speed switch, which that's what the wiper switch needs. Headlight switch, this just plugs right in. You can use the diagram on here, like I did, to verify what comes in, what does what. I just use this, put my meter on the back of the switch, and open and close it to make sure that when I did that, it closed the paths between power and where it needs to go on each one. So my switch should be okay. We're going to find out when we plug it in, otherwise we'll get another one. But that's plugged in. I guess we can plug in the wiper motor switch. And now we'll start working on the ignition switch, putting these into the little plastic job. There's your pre-terminated wires that go into our little connector housing there. There's 5 of them, and as you can see, we have 4 pins on the back of our switch. Switch is labeled battery, ignition, accessory, and solenoid, so you know what those are, at least I do. But there's a 5th one here, and it's also called out in the instructions. This is the ignition switch ground. We don't have that on this one. It does say ground right there, but there's no terminal for this particular switch to have it. Some of the later model ones may have it, and there is a provision for it inside the switch housing, or the connector housing. So we're just going to go ahead and wire that up, plug that little guy in there, just so it's there for if we decide to change switches later. And we're going to go like this. You can use instructions, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, battery is going to be your red guy. We're going to put that one in there first. Next one's going to be your solenoid, which is going to be purple wire. It's going to go right there. And these are just plug and play. Probably boring. You're going to skip ahead. You got it. Accessory wire is going to go right there. And these are labeled too. If you don't know which one does what, they're printed on the circuit. Accessory wire is brown. Well, why did I turn that? Accessory wire is brown. Brown wire. Ignition wire is going to be your pink wire. And then for the last, the unused one, at least in our case, is going to be this green wire. And we're going to stick that in there too, just so it's there. There you go. Now your ignition switch is wired. Just make sure that when you put these in, the tabs for these didn't get bent and everything lines up. And then we'll just leave that right like that for now, until we get everything hooked up. Key switch. Alright guys, here's another case of automotive archaeology. I don't know, reading Rainbow got me today. Anyways, I went to hook up the turn signal switch for this. Could not find the little half moon shaped connector, and I looked all under the column, and then I could see, just even with the column, I saw that portion cut. So I removed the little cover job, and then I found this craziness. somebody at some point tried doing some things and let the smoke out. Went back to the original harness because I had kept that. And it may have been because of whatever this is. I don't know what they were trying to accomplish here, but you can see the purple wire is just super hot. May have been something down the road that the brake lights may have been down the road that, you know, something happened going to that fuse or downstream toward the taillights, that something happened and it just kind of smoked the whole thing out. But I found that. So we're gonna try to find a turn signal switch and get that moving. I'm gonna terminate the harness so that that's done and can just plug into that when I put that in there. But, you know, gotta look at your junk. Sometimes you won't even know what you know until you know it. That makes sense, right? So next thing we're gonna do is the courtesy lighting. It's the shine down your feet lights. These didn't come with those usually, so they give you these nice little connectors. These are on most of the later market GM stuff. Just goes in with a little screw that they give you in the bottom of the dash, and it shines down on the dash. It does have a nifty little connector though. One goes in that little slot down there at the bottom, and then another one goes, can't really see it, goes in this hole here, and it catches the side of the case of the bulb for the ground. Goes in that little hole. So this is the weird shaped one. It's kind of springy, comes in from the bottom like so. Not gonna clip that in yet, but goes in the bottom and it kind of catches the bulb. And then this little guy, it's hard to do with one hand. This little guy comes in from the side there, goes down and it just barely see it. The little ground catches the case. So power to the middle, ground to the outside. This one's going to be orange. This one's going to be white. We're going to terminate those off of here and all will be right. There's that light bulb. Looks like he's smiling at you. Put this in Tech Flex, and I just kind of zip tied it out of the way for now until we make sure everything's going to be where it's going to be at. Happen to have some LED bulbs in stock, and that's where that one's going to go. Now we're going to terminate the other side. So we got the passenger side somewhat loomed up, and there's already some holes underneath here in the dash, as you'll find on yours also. I picked the larger of the hole. Got one of these little Christmas tree guys right there, and then there you go. You'll never see that, or I can cut some of that off. But anyways, brings us over here. We're gonna mount this light, and there it is, the light. You'll never know it was there unless you're under the dash. So there that is. So I had to salvage the connector from the original harness for the turn signal switch, which is on order because of that. So this is just gonna kind of hang out here. Kind of got the, you know, all these other switches here. I'm not putting the dash back together now because we have other things to do as we go down the road. I got my extras labeled up down here. As soon as I make sure that they're not going to be in the way, I'm going to zip tie these up here. And now I'm going to finish up the turn signal harness that goes from the firewall up to the hood. And then we'll be pretty much done. I can test this thing out. So it had 3 pre-terminated connectors. I just pushed them in the connector here. And then I made my wires, you know, the length that they need to be. And I'm going to terminate those and plug those in. So the courtesy lights work. I only have one light. I'm going to have to order another one. That one light works in both sockets. Got the dome light to work. Gave it a new running lights. High beams work. Low beams work. Parking and turn signals work. So I can't test the actual turn signal flashing or the brake lights. What else? The dimmer switch. I had to hot wire. There's a couple parts we discovered that were bad on this. I'm not going to let that hold this video up. However, it will not leave the shop until all those things are replaced. I just can't do that. So for purposes of this video, I'm going to call that a win. Got all the wipers and the heater and all those other things done. Courtesy lights, the lights, key switch works, all of the things. So painless. It's pretty painless. The only thing you got to do is make sure you have a crimper. Depending on what style you want. I might throw a couple down in the description just so you guys have a couple options. But problem child is wired, at least the truck is. So stay tuned and keep an eye out for our next couple videos as we continue to work on this and get this thing ready to run and drive. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.